Welcome back, Time Crunch fans. I'm your host, Coach Adam Pulford. I'm here once again with Tony Bustamante of Velosmith Bike Studio to expand on our previous episode where we focused on the best practices for athletes coming into race day or your big event. In this show, we're gonna focus a lot on the tires and wheels, and really it's like tires, wheels, pressure. Oh my, Tony! When you and I were talking before, we were talking about how there really isn't any perfect choice out there, especially in the way of tire wheel, but there are trade-offs, correct?
We have seen a pretty steady march toward a bigger tire, regardless of what category it is: road, gravel, mountain. Everything is now moving in the direction of bigger, and the data is basically giving people the confidence that a bigger tire is not slower, that a lower pressure is not slower. And I think there's a lot of there's a lot of relearning, because for so many years, if you're talking about the road category, 100 psi or 110 psi was the setup. But in that timing, we were also talking about tires that were much, much smaller. It was 5-6 years ago that we were still selling a lot of 28 millimeter tires as a fat road tire. And now 28 millimeter tires for us in the studio is simply service work. So if you have a bike that can't fit larger, that's where our 28 millimeter tire sales are going. And most common now, and we've seen this year over year, is they're jumping by 2 millimeters at a minimum. This is looking at our annual sales. So last year, 32 was our average tire size. And right now we're on track for 35 to be. And this is, again, averaging out road and gravel, which is our two areas that we focus on.
Yeah, that's wild to hear it just in that timestamp, but it's also not shocking based on, what my athletes are riding, what you read on Velo News and all this kind of stuff. And so I think with that plays into some relevancy, which we'll talk about, and how to even make a great bike or wheel choice down the road. But to the end of how fast this technology is really moving, you talked about width and pressure, but there's also tread or no tread. There's the sealant, just so much to talk about. Okay. And how this applies is, the tires and wheels were part of the bike category in our previous conversation, where but we wanted to reserve some extra time because there's just like so much, right? So now, why are tires so important to the rider, to the feel of the rider, to the performance? And what is the kind of the number one thing that stands out to you when it comes to event day preparation on that?
I think tires have always been an essential piece of event or race day equipment. Tire is where you're going to have a huge amount of input. So gearing on the bike may be really narrow in terms of what's going to be sufficient for an event. But with tire, with pressure, with sealant preferences, with rim profile, rim shape, rim width, these things are enormous. And it's actually, it's pretty exciting right now because there is so much stuff coming to market. And I think there are some examples of tire preferences based on events. So looking at Steamboat Gravel as one end of the continuum, looking at Big Sugar at the other end of the continuum, and really looking at surface conditions and Champagne Gravel versus something chunky and sharper. And so figuring out what the right setup can be a winning decision, and it can be a losing decision as well.
Yeah. I mean, that example of Steamboat versus Big Sugar is probably the best example on the gravel side of things of how drastic or night and day difference, that can be. But I'll say this, coming from the mountain bike side of things, where I'll say this, I don't have a problem swapping tires if you do a pre-ride or if you get some information that it's whoa, this is super chonky and you need something with more tread. I'll swap tires all day. And here's why. So I used to be a team director for professional mountain bike teams, and part of the strategy was to get there, Wednesday or Thursday, recon, race, go home, and away we go. Now we have professional riders and we have professional mechanics, so there's that to keep in mind. But our riders would go out, maybe take a few laps, come back and be like, oh man, I need to, dumb down the pressure a little bit, or let's just swap it out. So we'll swap wheels because we already have some, maybe we put on tires that morning and threw it on there because we know that would be through in sealant, all the things. But it's again, we were professionals, people. However, it is common practice in the way that mountain bike wheels and mountain bike tires were set up and are set up these days. You can do that on the downhill side of things, on the cross country side of things. It's pretty common practice. Maybe blow a tire out or something like that, throw it on, go and race again. So there is that element from the mountain bike side of things. I know that you don't have the same luxury of maybe pre-riding big sugar as an amateur athlete and then swapping out tires the night of, unless you travel with your own mechanic. But in that way, how would you advise listeners here, Tony, to get information about what tires to run and what PSI to run on race day?
I think in many ways that's a job for the internet. There's just a tremendous amount of dialogue out there about events, about tire choices, about conditions. And, I've been riding and racing my bike for a long, long time. We used to just call the shops that were local to where the event was and ask what the tire of choice was, especially in the mountain bike category. I think you're trying to balance tread, and you don't want too much tread that it becomes a penalty on any fast sections that are smoothed out, and you don't want a tread that is going to provide too little in terms of protection against sharp stuff on the course. So there's some really good insight that you can get from people who have come before you for this event. But again, the local shops are going to give you they have a lot of information.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, Leadville being a great example. Call up Cycles of Life up in Leadville and say, what's the most common tire you see with success, on course?
Right.
That's one example. But yeah, scouring the edges of the internet, Chat GPT, all good. Talk with your race partners, listen to podcasts and that sort of thing. We're not going to give a ton of that specific information because again, it's so specific to not only the course, but the weather itself. Weather comes in, could change that quite a bit.
Yep.
Which leads us a little bit to tire pressure, because that'll depend on if it's muddy, if it's dry, if it, the width of all this kind of stuff. So can you talk about how tire pressure is part of that equation when it comes to dialing in, the best experience for the rider, for the race, for the conditions on race day?
Wheels are a system. So looking at tire volume, looking at rim internal width is an important piece. And then looking at the type of rim that you have, whether it's hooked or hookless. And we always recommend that you use one of the different calculators that are online. We do a lot with Envy. We do some with Zip. And in both scenarios, if you're riding Envy wheels, we direct you to the Envy pressure calculator. If you're riding Zip, we point you to the Zip. Silka also has one. Vittoria just launched one recently. And so I think starting there is really essential. And some of them are going to be more detailed than others. Some are going to look at total rider, bike, combined weight. Others look at a much simpler, just tire volume, rim width. But I think either way, and to go back to the last segment, this is about backing up your preparation time and zeroing in on tire that is going to be a good choice for the event, and then tinkering with the pressure. In today's day and age, where you have such a low pressure, a PSI or two has a big impact or a big effect on the way the tire feels. So spending some time riding some similar conditions to event day and zeroing in not just on tire pressure as recommended, but then tire pressure as your preference.
Yeah. Yeah. In that first episode, I introduced you as a forever tinkerer of all things bikes. And I think your tinkering side of things is very much so entertained with tire pressure these days, as is mine, because the 2 psi or more can make a huge difference. I would say I recently got a bike like last year, and I was moving up to 32s and 35s, and rethinking the pressure, right? Because
Yeah.
I was using some Zip 353s, right, and 32s, and the suggested pressure was down into the 44 up front, 46 in the back with my system weight, and I was like, and I think even I had one ride where it didn't think about it, put it back up to like 55 or 60, whatever I was running the 28s on, went out and rode, and I was just terrible in the corners on the descents, where normally I'm pretty decent. And I'm like, what is going on? Check my tire pressure. I'm like, oh yeah, bled off 15. Went out the next day and just ripped it. Felt awesome. So in that way, like old habits die hard. Think differently. Think outside the box and check the calculators because
Yep.
they're not wrong. These manufacturers are producing in different ways, and you have to change those habits.
Yeah, and I think tire is one of those areas where you really can tinker in an endless
Mm-hmm.
form. I'll often start with what the pressure calculator recommends, and then I won't touch it. If a sealant system is well, established and set up, your pressure loss overnight is pretty small. And I'll sometimes start the week with recommended pressure, and then just allow it to naturally lose air over the course of the week. And in that time frame, I might stumble into a pressure that feels just so much better than anything else I'd ridden. And so it's a happy accident, but it ends up working pretty well. And then I have a gauge that is accurate. It's mostly calibrated to be below 50 psi, and so then when I find that spot that feels really good, I'll take a measurement and get the number, and then keep that as my new normal.
Yeah, that's
Years of cyclocross has made me be very focused on tire pressure.
yeah. I think when you're an off-road athlete like cyclocross or mountain bike, you get super weird about tire pressure. And I was going to say one pro tip is have like a hand pressure device.
Yep.
Like Schwalbe makes one, Silca makes. I mean, everybody's making them now, but you can travel with it, right? So whether you travel internationally or you go to the race or you're just at the local track and you just want to check pressure real quick, it's accurate and consistent. So no matter if you got to borrow a pump or CO2 it up or whatever, you can always bleed down to your known pressure. So
Yep.
that's it.
With your known
Yeah,
gauge.
with your
Yep.
known gauge, exactly. That's the point,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So yeah, and I think for anyone here is like Tony said, the ideal pressure on race day has a lot of factors that go on to it. Okay, the course, the conditions, the weather, your tire wheel system, right? All that, but you suss it out over time. You tinker over time. Hopefully, this episode is getting to everybody before some of the midsummer, so you can tinker away going down. But I think explore within the boundaries of manufacturers' recommendations on this, so you don't have a whoopsies. But in that way, you find what's going to work well for you in those conditions. And I'd also say, like, it goes both ways. Meaning, you overpressure, you go, you have a bad experience. You trickle down, like Tony was talking about, you have a good experience. Like, oh, then measure it, see what worked with that, right? Meanwhile, I had a conversation with one of my athletes. He was like, man, should I go 32s or 35s or what? I'm like, buy a set of he could. So buy a set of 30s, buy a set of 32s, buy a set of 35s. Ride them for a couple weeks, find what works for you. And this was also based on his bike that we, Googled what's the max tire pressure, max tire size, and
With
go for it, right? So tinker away, try it if you can.
Yeah, and I think now when we're looking at bikes that have this wide range of tire compatibility, they're in that range of tires. There's going to be an optimal handling,
Mm-hmm.
and as you move away from that optimal handling, either going smaller in the tire or going larger in the tire, you impact the way that the bike steers and the way the bike handles. And so I think that's, we will often say with many of the bikes that we sell that if you're doing it right, you have a bin in your garage of different tires, because you're going to start to unlock all of the potential of, especially a gravel bike, with larger volume, smaller volume, bigger knobs, smaller knobs. It really does impact and change the way the bike rides.
Don't ask my wife about all the slightly used tires in our garage. Drives her nuts.
They're just waiting for the right event.
That's right, Tony. I'm going to use that. Thank you.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm going to say something, and I don't think I'm wrong. I'm going to say the question of how come gravel? Okay, people think gravel has all this like innovation and revolution. Now the road has too, and oh my gosh, so excited. I'm going to say this though: the spirit of wheel and tire evolution. It's not the gravel; it's mountain bike, because we had all the tires hanging up in the garage or down in the bin or whatever for all the different course conditions for a long time. Okay. And even back in the 90s, where there was just a shit ton of money flowing through the mountain bike scene, there was a bunch of just revolution happening, from going from rim to disc to wider is better for both the rim and the tire. And then all of a sudden going tubeless and sealant. And now gravel and road, they're just catching up. So am I wrong to say that mountain bike is the spirit of all bikes?
No. I would say that
people are going to make
with
fun
cycling,
of me for that, but, oh well.
what's great about cycling is that there's a lot of it that's really not new, right? So you go back 100 years, and some of the technologies that we're seeing that are labeled as new and great have been around for a long time. I think what's different now is, I say this, I was in the cycling world when mountain bikes were really coming into to become something. And it was just an incredible time. And there was so much new that was happening. There were so many areas that were developing rapidly, expanding exponentially. It was so exciting. And I think when we look at gravel, and maybe to a lesser extent road, that's what's happening right now. There is just a huge amount of evolution that's happening. I mean, this is a moment, 20 years from now, we're going to talk about the birth of gravel, and we're talking about right now. So yeah. It's an exciting time. I think right now, the other thing that's happening is we're seeing a lot of companies look not just within the walls of the boardroom and say, here's what people need. They're actually looking at how people are using the equipment and where they're using it, and then building equipment for the users, which is that's a departure. I mean, we've had many years where it's just here's what you're going to ride.
Yeah, that's a huge market change. I think it's really important. Why do you think that's occurring now, though?
Honestly, I think the internet. I think social media is providing a greater awareness for companies who want to listen, and that's pretty exciting. And so the move toward again, to use gravel as an example, we saw when it first came to market, gearing was enormous, and then we saw it swing the other direction and resemble more of a road gearing. And then now we're seeing it land somewhere in between. And that's rider feedback that's helping arrive at these places. Yeah. And the same is true with tires. We're seeing tires now moving literally into what is a mountain bike tire. And I don't think we're done yet. I think that's going to, the pendulum is going to continue to swing, and we're going to zero in on other things. What's exciting now is that there are companies who are willing to invest in this stuff. So we can try it. And if it's great, it'll stick around. And if it's not, it'll go away.
All right, Tony. So as we start to close this episode out in this series of our Tech Talk, if some of our listeners are listening to this and they're like, man, yeah, it's time to update my bike, or I should give Tony a call. Like, what if somebody calls you and says, I'm looking for a new bike? What should I get? how would you handle a client like that, either from afar or in person? I don't even know if you do from afar, but walk us through like what is the logic or what do you want to know from that person before they purchase a bike through you, and also Velosmith Bike Studio. It's a pretty unique. I know about it, but maybe take some time and, and explain what you do at Velosmith.
Yeah, well, so Velosmith is a reflection of all the years that I've had in the bike industry, and so what we do is we provide a very hands-on approach to buying a bicycle, and so the fitting is an important part of it. The equipment selection is an important part of it, but I think the real reason that people come to see us is the conversations that we have, because it's important to learn about how people want to use these bikes. So there are a lot of off-the-shelf options that just say gravel, and I'm going to do gravel, so this is a perfect choice. We like to tinker. We like to nerd out on that stuff and really dig in and figure out what is the right choice. So we work with people all around the world, which is cool. An incredible thing to say. But I think we always look at it as being the bike that we're going to build for you is a reflection of how you're going to use it 80% of the time. So how are you going to use this bike 80% of the time? We don't want to build a bike specifically for one event that's an outlier, unless you want to buy a bike for that one event that's an outlier. But if you're looking for something that's just going to be a great bike to ride day in, day out, then we look at how you're going to use it 80% of the time. We look at your history as a cyclist. We look at equipment that you're using now. And then we also look at the future and how someone is going to age into this. And our goal with the products that we select, and I should point out, we're not a typical bike shop. We are truly independent. The brands that we sell, the products that we sell, are brands that we've chosen. They're brands that we use on a daily basis. It is not a corporate directive or a sales rep who's telling us what we're going to stock. The choices that we carry, the product choices we carry, are ours. And so getting everybody aligned with the right choices is communication. It's a collaborative effort, and ideally, it's a bike that will last a long time. It's a bike that's serviceable. It's a bike that's durable. It's a bike that's reliable.
Yeah, no, that's a great explanation of what you do, Tony. And like I said, I didn't know if you worked with clients from afar, but I think in that way, for everybody listening here, hopefully that gets you thinking about your experience on your bike. Like if you've got an awesome bike and you just got it, great. Maybe this inspires you to go get a fit if something's not feeling just right. Hopefully hopefully it motivates you to go to the bike shop, talk to your mechanic, and just have better conversations with them. Get your bike in 2 to 3 weeks out before the main event, right? That's what Tony and I are really pressing hard to do. But if you're looking for a new bike, and if you want a consultation, or if you want somebody like Tony that's going to guide you through in an individual way for that, this is your man. So, like I said, Tony, it's the way he thinks. That's what drew me to him for these 2 podcasts. So, Tony, I really want to thank you again for your time out of the busy studio life and taking some time and talking to our guests here, because I think everyone's going to get a lot out of it and get inspired and think in different ways about all things bike tech.
Thanks, Adam. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be on the roster here. So
this is awesome. And what I'll do, listeners, is I will link to the Velosmith Bike Studio website, as well as check them out on Instagram. Like I said, if you don't do anything other than just go look at the beautiful builds there, do that. It's worthwhile. But if that, like I said, if that turns into reaching out, just tell Tony that Coach AP sent you and you heard us on the podcast. It'd be super fun to see where that goes. And if anybody has a training partner or a friend that needs to hear this podcast because they always turn up to the big race with clapped out equipment, go ahead and share this episode with them.
Love it.
Finally, if you have any questions about equipment or anything that we talked about today, head over to trainright.com/podcast and you can submit a question there. And if you say, get Tony back on the podcast to talk more about tech talk stuff, happy to do it. This is the first time in a while where I really like nerded out on like bike tech. So we'll see where it goes. Tony, again, thank you for joining us on the Time-Crunched Cyclist.
Thank you, Adam.